¿Qué tal? Buenos días. Bienvenidos a este webinar de martes 17 de octubre. Y pues muy contenta de estar aquí con ustedes. Yo soy la arquitecta Alejandra Sánchez Gálvez y estaré acompañándolos en este webinar. Pues nada más como una introducción, les comparto que soy arquitecta egresada de la Universidad de Anáhuac y tengo más de 30 años dedicándome a lo que es la arquitectura, la construcción y a todo lo que conlleva, al igual que el interiorismo. Y paralelamente llevo 23 años siendo también docente en el Tecnológico de Monterrey, en el área de arquitectura y diseño industrial. Y asimismo, otro de mis hobbies, que también tengo más de 25 años, es escribir sobre arquitectura, diseño e interiorismo. Así es de que espero que con este antecedente ustedes se sientan tranquilos, que podamos hacer un enlace y podamos hacer una reflexión muy interesante con nuestro invitado del día de hoy. Quiero recordarles, antes de comenzar, que nos gustaría recordar a todos los estudiantes que enviaremos un formulario de inscripción durante esta sesión, y esto es esencial para que puedan optar por un certificado de participación. Y para esto siempre se debe de asistir al menos a 22 sesiones, que son el 50% de ellas, y además contar con 50% de asistencia para poder pues entrar a diversas becas ofrecidas por las universidades en el convenio. Así es que los esperamos, damos tal vez un minuto o dos para empezar al 100. Bueno, pues vamos comenzando y bienvenidos nuevamente a esta charla, a este webinar llamado Transdisciplinary Mobility Design, que es en colaboración con la IED. Y bueno, el nombre de nuestro ponente, nuestro invitado es Wouter Haspelach, va a ser en inglés. Y si les parece, vamos a iniciar. A nombre de la Cámara de Comercio Italiana en México, les doy la más cordial bienvenida a esta presentación que forma parte de la tercera edición de Encuentro Creativo, que es un proyecto de la Cámara Italiana apoyado por la Embajada de Italia en México. El objetivo de esta sesión es promover la oferta académica italiana en México. Señoras, señores, alumnos, gente que nos acompaña, les doy una calurosa bienvenida a todos ustedes a esta sesión de encuentro creativo titulada, como habíamos comentado, Transdisciplinary Mobility Design. Tenemos el honor de tener hoy con nosotros a Wouter Haspelach del Instituto Europeo de Diseño, Instituto Europeo de Design, IED. La IED es una red internacional de educación creada en Italia que desde 1966 difunde la cultura y la innovación en el ámbito del diseño, la moda, las artes visuales, la comunicación y gestión de las industrias creativas que promueven el cambio social, cultural y económico. Durante más de 50 años, IED viene desarrollando una propuesta educativa de gran calidad y alta empleabilidad. Ahora voy a dar la bienvenida a nuestro invitado, a nuestro orador, a Wouter Haspelach, y para tal situación vamos a leer un breve biografía, una breve currículum de nuestro invitado, porque bueno, su trayectoria es muy grande, pero para efectos de aprovecharlo y que nos hable de este gran tema, podemos decir que Wouter trabaja en el límite entre la movilidad y la ciudad, siempre con un fuerte carácter innovador. Actualmente dirige el departamento Departamento de Urbanismo y Movilidad de Gran Estudio. En este puesto ha colaborado en numerosos proyectos internacionales de movilidad junto con su equipo. Realiza investigaciones independientes sobre movilidad y colabora estrechamente con agentes públicos y privados de todo el mundo, urbanos y plan maestros visionarios. También con este diseño Transdisciplinary Design, un programa totalmente nuevo que nació de la necesidad de perfiles más transdisciplinares para dar forma al futuro de la movilidad. Wouter es también conferencista y ponente habitual sobre diversos temas de movilidad. Así es de que vamos a dar paso a la plática con nuestro invitado. Así es que, Wouter, good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you, and we are ready to listen your webinar. Welcome.
Perfect. Let me try to share my screen. So, good morning to all of you. I seem to have a small problem. I cannot share my screen. Do I have the permission to share the screen?
Yes, one moment, Wouter.
Oh, okay.
Now you can share.
Perfect. I'll try to share with the sounds, which doesn't allow me to do this time, unfortunately. A couple of minutes ago, it still worked. Now it seems it would be possible to share my screen, but I cannot share the sound for some reason.
Try now, maybe you can.
Excellent. Okay, great. Good. Let's try to blow it up. And then the question that is always asked, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
nos
great.
pregunta Wouter si pueden ver la pantalla. Esperemos que sí. Si hay algún problema, favor de notificar en el chat. Gracias. Thank you, Wouter.
Okay, let's go for it then. So good morning, everyone. I'm calling in from basically the other side of the world. So it's already the end of the day for me. So probably, I hope at least, that your energy levels are still a bit higher than mine, but I'm quite sure that this is going to be a very interesting session. Today I'm here and I'm wearing a bit a double hat, in the sense that on one side, I'm here as the Chief Mobility Design at Grand Studio, but on the other side, I'm also here as the coordinator of the brand new Master of Transdisciplinary Mobility Design at the Istituto Europeo di Design here in Turin. But those two roles, actually, they have a lot in common. So I was just been introduced in, I think, a very nice way. I could not understand everything of it, but I'm quite sure that everything that you need to know has already been said. What I think is important for you to know is a little bit of my background. So originally, I'm from Belgium, and now already almost 9 years I live in Turin in Italy. Where professionally, at least, I'm responsible for mobility design or transdisciplinary mobility design in Grand Studio. And as I said before, also now a lot of my time and attention goes to the coordination of the Transdisciplinary Mobility Design Masters of Arts at IED. I see myself a bit as a transdisciplinary person myself, in the sense that I acquired a number of degrees in engineering, architecture, and then urbanism afterwards, which of course is a solid base to start from, but is not 100% mobility design. Mobility design is something that I mainly got in contact with through my career in Grand Studio. And I think it's, although this is not the topic of today's talk, but I think it's important for you to understand what Grand Studio is and why this is important. So Grand Studio is an international creative consultancy, and we operate among the entire mobility ecosystem. And basically, as you can see in the graph, we are organized according to three big, oops, this went a bit too fast, according to three big sections. So there is the automotive section, there is a mobility section, and then there is a digital section, which you have here. And the interesting part is, of course, not only in the sections themselves, but in the overlap. And so altogether, we cover basically the entire mobility field. But what is it then that we do on a daily basis? Well, basically, we define, design, and develop the future, we define, design, and develop future mobility means. And future mobility means, I think, you can interpret as quite broad. You can see a lot of different things, from child strollers to infrastructural works to vehicles to digital interfaces. And basically, our interpretation of mobility means is very much related to how we say in English, a means to an end. So whatever that can contribute in a positive way to our mobility is something that we get in contact with and that we work with. So this is a bit our daily bread and butter, you know. Many people see us as a interesting design studio, which of course is true, but we go much beyond the classic types of activities that you find in classic design studios. So we develop also our own methodologies, and we work together on a daily basis within the studio, and then of course with all our clients and partners in a transdisciplinary way to create a very rich type of work and create very interesting projects altogether. Okay, but having said that, let's start somewhere else. And the story of today, the story that I want to tell you, is a story that you can tell in many different ways. Specifically for today, I chose to start here. And this is a small village. At the time was a small village. Now it's a considerable city in the north of Italy. It's called Bolzano. Why I want to start with this map is because it allows us to understand that mobility and the way people move around and the way our space has been always correlated. So there was always a conversation between both. And so this is a map of more or less the year 1700. So rather old. And the interesting thing about this map is that all the way at the top, although it's written in German, we have two time scales, or two scales. One is a time scale and the other is a distance scale. And if you would compare both, and you would understand that for 1 hour of travel, more or less 5 kilometers has been calculated. So that means that the basis of travel on this map was simply walking or walking with a horse. And of course, that has a consequence. And this is something that basically always remained the same. So the base of moving around being very much correlated with the available mobility means. So this is another Italian city. This is much more to the south. This is Naples. And it's a picture from about 200 years later. So this is about the year 1900. And what you see here is that basically this is one of the most important squares of the city. And of course, it's public space. But at the time, public space was social space, was commercial space, was religious space, was leisure space, was political space, was a lot of different things. And somewhere along the line, and here I inserted a bit of a dramatic effect, and we go to a picture of the 1960s. Somewhere along the line, all of these functions were basically reduced to parking. And of course, you can say your car somewhere, but at the same time, all of these urban functions that are so important for us human beings, they went completely swept away. This is a picture, an aerial picture of my native country, so from Belgium. And I think it's quite striking if you look at this, how all considered in a city so ancient as this one, that quite late in the process, there was suddenly the car, and the car came with all its infrastructure, and you had these very weird urban configurations, like isolated pieces of the city inside a traffic changer, which is completely ridiculous if you look back at it now, of course. But even if you think, so this is again Belgium, but this is true for basically all the cities around the world that predate the popular era of the car. We try to make our cities work with cars, but it doesn't always go so smooth. So we need a lot of rules and a lot of science to try to make it work more or less, but it remains quite a problematic relation. Where we come to is actually a bit of a synthesis of everything that I said before. And the problem is that in this entire discourse throughout the centuries, basically through our own human desire, we used the available mobility means, and those in turn were defining the space we live in. So the space is almost a consequence of our own selfish desires to move around. And this is something that is still very true, and a lot of design studios still use this, and they say user experience is the basis of everything and the only thing we actually need to listen to. The problem, of course, is that you just repeat the errors that have been made also in the past. What we do actually is something different. And what we do is we turn these external arrows around. And so it creates a new balance. And we say the user, of course, is still important, but we also have to look at the content. And the mobility means or the vehicles are then just almost a crystallization of the perfect balance between what we want the context to be and what we still desire from a human point of view. Obviously, what that means is that when the context changes, that the results is quite different. So the resulting vehicle that we can create to become this perfect balance will have a different shape. And it's not only that when the context changes that that the resulting vehicle changes, it is also, of course, that our desires change. My desire if I drive on the highway is something very different than my desire when I walk in a city center. So all of these things are in constant motion. And through this design in what we call context-specific design, and this is already quite getting towards a master class, but context design allows us to actually create vehicles or mobility solutions that perform better in the environment they are actually designed for. These days, a lot of people, they drive around in an SUV, and an SUV can do a bit of everything, but it does not really excel in something. So if we want to excel in something, we need to go to context-specific solutions. So what I want to do next is explain a couple of examples that we have been developing in the past. Through these examples, I hope that we will come to a point of understanding of how context-specific mobility design is very important for the future. The first one I want to start with is a project for a Dutch startup. It's called Lightyear. And to understand this project, of course, we need to think about the context. And the context of this project is intercity and is highway use. Of course, if you think of highway, what comes to mind is speed. So if we want to move fast, we need to create a vehicle that is aerodynamic. And this one is literally designed off the charts. So it's got actually the world record of the most aerodynamic family production car ever made. This, of course, means that you can go faster with less energy. Another thing that that is important here is if we push this even further, the big concept of this startup company is to reduce the energy that you use, and at the same time also create energy while you drive. So as you can see, the entire car is packed with solar cells. So the front hood, the roof, and the entire back is packed with solar cells. And we have more than 5 square meters of solar cells integrated into this vehicle. This, of course, is very difficult to achieve from a design point of view, because what you usually want is a car that is as small as possible, but to have a maximum gain of the solar power, you need to have a surface that is as big as possible. So somewhere in between these two graphs, they cross each other, and so this car that we designed is the ideal cross point between surface area and an efficient car. But of course, if you think about this, who is on board? What is it about? Why do you need to move? And so it's clearly that this is targeted on towards families. So this is a family car. So that means that also the interior of the car becomes much more important. And thinking about the future and preparing yourself for the future and preparing ourselves for the future, we all know that eventually in quite a number of years, something like autonomous cars or driverless vehicles will become reality. Probably not everywhere, probably not all the vehicles, but the highway is a very good starting point to implement the technology. And we already can see these days today that certain brands have been starting to push the limits. So also Lightyear. On certain stretches on the highway, the car goes completely by itself. So that means that how people behave and how these families can interact with each other inside the car while they are driving, this relation completely changes. And so the interior design and the interaction of what you can do in a car becomes completely different. So all in all, this is a first fast example that I wanted to give you about a vehicle that is clearly built for speed and clearly built to travel quite considerable distances. The next vehicle that I want to talk about is this one. This is already a rather old project. This is a project that dates back to over 10 years ago by now. And at first sight, it is a robotic autonomous taxi that drives in the inner city. So we are now in an urban environment. We're not on the highway anymore. This, of course, means that in the city, we usually have a lot of traffic problems. And one way to reduce these traffic problems is just by mathematics. So the more people you put in one vehicle, the less vehicles you need to move on the streets. So that means that sharing is a key point in these dense urban areas. And so this indeed is a shared vehicle. But a shared vehicle, of course, what you need to take a look at or be careful with is that if sharing works on paper, that's one thing, but you need to convince people to actually use your product or use your service. And one way to seduce people to use your service or to use your vehicle is through design. Because if people feel attracted to a certain solution, they will probably also use it. It's something different than just a mathematical check in an Excel sheet that states that sharing is better. So in this vehicle, which is completely drawn from scratch to be shared, a lot of attention has been going to the sharing itself. So now the doors are open, but you can see that the ingress and egress is very royal. So we have two big doors that swing open. Because obviously the distances that we do in the city, they are rather short. And so proportionally for a travel, getting in and getting out becomes more important. Also, of course, if we talk about shared vehicles, we talk about keeping them clean. So that means that you cannot have any dirt traps. But also here we use the materials that are very easy to clean and to maintain. And so all in all, the idea is that you want to be seen in one of those vehicles, and that's the only way in which it really can take off and really can work. Of course, if we are in the inner city, then that means that there are also people around the vehicle. On the highway, there are only people in the vehicle. In the city, of course, there are people everywhere. So we also need to think about what is the image that we want to give to the city, to all those people, to the vehicles that we use. So usually people talk about driverless vehicles. And we said, well, driverless is maybe not the term that we prefer because it implies the same minus the driver, which is something less. So we started to use the term driver embedded vehicles. So the driver is still on board. And so we started to experiment with some forms of intelligence that can also be communicated to the people around the vehicle itself. And this was pushed through, so this is reflected here in the various ways of, for example, publicity. So as you can see, there is one vehicle which is standing still currently, which also has a publicity which is standing still. And the other vehicle is slowly driving forward, which then also has a publicity that is in motion at the same time. So these were very early projects that we did, which then afterwards we started to refine a bit, and we came to some interesting conclusions that we wanted to move forward with. This is Europe's capital. This is Brussels, a picture that was taken in the year 2015, so already also quite some years ago. And it was at a time when a lot of European cities, they were fighting each other to have the biggest pedestrian area possible. And what you see here is a couple of days after the city government decided to close the biggest street, which was full of traffic, and it was closed for traffic, and it became a pedestrian area. So maybe you would guess that it would be flooded with people, which is actually true. But the odd thing is that if you would look at where these people are, they're still all on the former sidewalk. That's a bit strange. Why is that? Of course, what you see here is a street that was designed for traffic, that was always designed for vehicles. And so in a natural way, except for the central man who is probably very brave to walk there all alone in this vast emptiness of the street, people feel comfortable in a scale that is made for people. And so here the sidewalk is rather large, and so still naturally feel attracted to walking on the sidewalk. Keep that in mind for a second. Let's move a bit more to the south and we go to Paris. Paris, we have the very famous Champs-Élysées, which is one of the most important streets in Paris. And about the same time, so still in 2015, the city decided that once a month for a full day, this big traffic road would be liberated from traffic and would become a pedestrian area. But of course, this is a massive area, even much bigger than what I just showed you on the previous picture. So thinking about this human scale, what can we do with it? How can we create something that is actually attractive, that can turn this idea of the avenue, which is basically French for street with trees, towards more a square feeling. And so we started to think various objects that you can find usually in the public realm, like benches, like light posts, maybe plants, maybe publicity columns and so on. And we try to imagine what if all these things can move all by themselves and can create in a matter of seconds, can create completely different spaces. And so we started to design first ideas. And this is a bench. This is a simple bench, which is almost circular and usually stands around the trees that you can find on the sidewalks of this massive avenue. And once every month, these benches all by themselves, because they have integrated motors and sensors, they can move to the center of the street. And they can immediately actually break with this massive scale and introduce a human factor into the story and to actually create this much more square feeling that we all like and that we all crave for in the city. This first idea, we thought, well, there is actually something interesting in. And so we start to experiment with different shapes. So here you see at the bottom right, you see this bench, but also then we had some things with roofs, and they would slowly hover around and create some sort of ambience. And we decided to do a new iteration on this type of concept, and we came to a shape that we actually liked quite a bit better, which is this shape. So all of these things we started to call mobjects, and mobjects is short for mobile objects. So it is some sort of urban furniture or urban architecture which is mobile, which can move all by itself. And it's some sort of autonomous vehicle that can facilitate pedestrian areas to grow beyond a scale that many people would consider to be walkable. So of course, this condition is completely different. Here it is not about speed at all. If it's not about speed, then that means that we can throw aerodynamics overboard. So what you can see here is that these type of vehicles, they look a bit more like a shelter. They look a bit more like architecture. In that way, actually, they fit much better in this urban environment. And so talking about transdisciplinary design, we need to think about everything, of course. So not only about this type of vehicle, also about the economics. How will it be used? And for us, it was very important that these type of vehicles, they should be used for free. Otherwise, you lose this type of flexibility. So how this works is basically you have one big screen that is integrated in the vehicle. And since the vehicle is an autonomous vehicle, it already has all the various sensors on board for geo-based tracking. And so we added to this a layer of geo-based advertisements. So that means that all the shops that are in the neighborhoods, they can buy a certain amount of square meters. And if the vehicle would pass through there, it would show publicity for that specific shop. And so in that way, the people that are actually using this type of vehicle, they can use it just for free. They can just hop on and jump off. The big difference with cars in the city, of course, is that if a car is being parked, it is just a dead spot. It has only a negative impact. This thing, being mobile furniture, actually still functions as furniture when it is not mobile. When it is charging, for example, it can still be used, and it brings still something positive to the area in which it is. So the types of area that we imagine these type of vehicles to live in or to function in are, for example, university campuses or business campuses. Like you see here, this again is Paris, business districts, but also city centers, of course, large pedestrian areas. Even to some extent, we noticed that all over the world, airports and transfer hubs, they become so big and so massive that even indoors or in between buildings, people have to cover up to 2 kilometers of distance. And so vehicles like this can help by achieving that. It's important to notice that these type of solutions, these type of vehicles, they are not intended as a unique solution in the sense that you have to use them. No, they enable walking. So that means that the base is still people walking, but if you have difficulties walking all the distance, you can just make use of one of those vehicles. And of course, one of the difficult things with trying to crack the nut of public transport has to do with a certain threshold of density that you need to achieve before the service or the vehicle is economically viable. This is something different. You see the solar cells integrated in the roof. And so basically this vehicle is completely independent, can just be implemented somewhere in the center of a city, for example, and it is fully functional from the very first vehicle onwards. And so it is very scalable also in that sense, with quite a low buy-in at the start. So what we come to is an understanding of mobility, which is based on a couple of important aspects. We have been talking about vehicles, of course. We have been talking about context, so the city or the built environment. We have been talking about the user, and the user, of course, makes use of services, usually still today through our phones or our wearables, so digital platforms. So this all together, of course, brings or shapes a bit what our current understanding is about mobility. The problem with this is that if you have so many elements or ingredients that live together and that make up for mobility, they all move at different paces. They all move at different time scales. So services like, for example, an application on your mobile phone, you can just download, and in a matter of seconds or minutes, you have complete new functionality of a service. While a vehicle, of course, is something physical, and usually a vehicle remains on the streets for quite a number of years. Infrastructure, we are going to plan for much, much longer. So knowing this, we already see a problem. What if we have to imagine or have to plan for mobility in our cities in the year 2040, for example? That means that maybe we still use the same infrastructure as today with different vehicles and maybe already 10 iterations of services. So we need to look ahead quite a bit. This is an image that is from a French architect, and he made it a couple of years ago, and basically it was his vision for what Paris could look like in the year, I believe, 2040. Spectacular architecture, you cannot deny that, but if you look a bit lower on the street itself, what you see is that the cars are all just the cars of the day that the picture was made in. So here already you see a bit, okay, but he makes a stance about architecture, but what does it mean for the mobility in the city? What does it mean for how we use our streets in the future? Turns out that he did not really know that. This is a infamous quote or famous quote, maybe by Henry Ford. We don't have any proof of it, but I think it's interesting. I think it allows us to understand that the future, it's not just an extrapolation of what we know today and what the past has been. The future is something radically different. If we look at some numbers, these what you see here to the left is a graph by or based on data published by Václav Smil. And what you see here is, I think, quite self-explanatory. The use of energy worldwide has been booming quite a bit. What you see on the right is an article of earlier this year of the World Economic Forum. As you can read, it says that in Europe, basically no cars can be sold after the year 2035 that emit CO2. The thing though, if you put these two together, it allows you to understand that just converting our vehicles that we already know into electric alternatives will not save the world. It will not be enough. We need a radical change. How to imagine this radical change? What you see here is a graph which is a process graph. And basically, on the horizontal axis, you see a timeline. On the vertical axis, you see various steps of a design process. The more up, the more abstract, the more down, the more concrete. And so this is a process that we adopted quite some years ago. And what is unique about it is that usually people start to imagine a change, thinking about their conditions of today. So as you can see here, what we do and what actually you all should do is to move that frame of reference towards the far future. And you need to have a good grip or you need to have a good insight in how the future will be different, and start to design from there and not base yourself just on the limitations of today. If you base yourself on the limitations of today, you end up with situations like this. This is a piece of infrastructure that has been built in the city of Ghent in Belgium. And it has been built in the 70s, in the 1970s, where people thought that the future was the car. And the idea was, as you can see here, to bring the highway straight to the heart of the old city. Of course, this was rooted in a period in which the main form of transportation was the car, and basically everyone went from door to door with his or her own car. Nowadays, we see that this is impossible. If we would grant it to everyone, we will end up nowhere. Everything is stuck. But so we use what we call multimodality. So we use different type of vehicles within one single trip. Traditionally, all these vehicles and all these spaces that we use, they have been designed rather well, and so the quality of what they offer individually is rather good. However, it is in between. If you have to switch these different modes, if you have to switch these different vehicles, it is in between that it all falls apart. Things that we all know, if you need to wait for the bus in the rain, or if your train has been delayed with quite a bit of time, or maybe you flew in business class to your holiday destination and it was a wonderful flight, and then you discovered that everyone took the same deal on the rental car, and the first 4 hours of your splendid holiday, you have to queue in this shitty airport lobby. You have to queue to get your car. So one of the things that we need to take care of in mobility design as a whole is also to address these in-between things. And these in-between things you have to do with architecture, or with infrastructure, or with services, and so on. Let me skip a couple of slides here, and let's begin here again. So in which various areas of the city, the government of London has decided that a number of parkings that you can have for residential buildings can be only up to 10%. That means that basically for every 10 apartments, there can only be 1 parking spot. That, of course, is very difficult for real estate developers to make profits out of. So what we did is we defined a complete system of a mobility offering, in which when you buy the apartments, will be also granted access to mobility, not just buy a parking, but have access to mobility. And this has been done through the app, so an application, but also through actually modifying the building itself to create a mobility hub within the building itself, and also by creating a range of vehicles that have a very small footprint that can basically drastically up the number of vehicles that you can park in a specific spot. So we started rather late today. There was a bit of a delay. I want to conclude with basically all of this, and this was just not even the peak of the iceberg. This was a very, very, very shallow introduction to transdisciplinary mobility. But I wanted to stop with talking a bit about our master program in transdisciplinary design in mobility. And I think the easiest way to do this is through a short video.
How do we transform the world? Or how can we shape the transformation of the world that is already occurring through mobility?
Transdisciplinary design is really about strategic issues.
To create this transdisciplinary approach, what we do every year, we select a team of people which come from all over the world.
Camilo Quiñones.
Sakumi Yamaguchi.
I've learned so much about just trying to handle and working together with such a diverse team.
Maria Lozoya.
Ivan Vietti.
Arvid de Grote.
Who each of them brings in a different competence.
I did my bachelor's from National Institute of Design.
My bachelor's is in architecture.
I studied language and culture in bachelor. Because I mean, we could have studied the same, but we wouldn't approach the same way.
To create a complete team which then together in a transdisciplinary way can tackle the subject of mobility.
It was really about unlearning some of the previous practices of their studies, of their businesses, to generate a new idea of being a transdisciplinary designer.
How was it to work with some of the experts of various fields that have been linked to mobility throughout the year? How was it to be able to discuss one-on-one with profiles like Virgilio, Michael, Lowy, Jan Christoph, and so on?
In this course, I didn't feel completely as a student anymore because we had like a lot of interaction with different professors. There are also a lot of like professionals that try to help us tackle the different problems. So in that sense, it felt less as really like having a normal course where you have like the professor and you are the student and you're just making some assignments. It was more like a collaboration between us and like working professionals.
To what extent can we rethink the car? Well, absolutely. We can radically rethink the car. We can radically rethink mobility systems. Everything. Is it immaterial? Is it material? Is it made of organic matter? Is it simply an idea? And these are the types of kind of out-of-the-box thinking that we need when entering an era that's defined by crisis, by scarcity, by precarity.
I would go for mobility design as such, but after experiencing, I realized it's as essential as like food, clothes, and shelter. And after that, it's mobility. It's something we do every day, but like subconsciously we are unaware of.
Okay, but like what is really the bare essence of mobility is not about like making the fastest or coolest car. It's more really about like trying to really solve real world problems.
So transdisciplinary mobility design is first and foremost about mobility, but our interpretation of mobility is not restricted to vehicles or how objects move. For us, mobility is a very broad, rich subject. It's about, of course, how we move through society, but also about how society is moved by mobility. It's also about social mobility. How do we move through the social strata of society?
We explore the future of mobility. From the payment systems to the systems of mobility between cities, Turin and Milan, to new service offerings, to charging, to designing public infrastructure and vehicles.
It's more about the values than design. Like, of course, like I've been a visual communication designer, and there are so many types of designs, but transdisciplinary particularly focuses more on the values. Like, what value are you setting before designing something?
We move beyond simple notions of design and we begin to think of the world as something that is designed. Our lives are designed. And we seek to understand that through bringing as many voices together and bring these voices together not solely to engage in a dialogue, but to actually co-produce something.
Design here is not limited to styling or appearance. This is really about applying all the possibilities of creativity to improve mobility in society.
We are really like tackling, you could say, global problems. So like the knowledge that we, I think, gain here can be applied anywhere.
Is learning how to deal with complexity. You're not designing for one person, you're designing like for millions, you can say. It's a huge, bigger impact you're looking at.
What does it mean to take non-human stakeholders into concern? What does it mean to think about the biodiversity as we design the new urban landscape or the new mobility systems?
It's not only your view on a topic anymore, it's the view of a shared view of all the others around you that are trying to solve a problem and trying to get the best solution out of it.
If you are a risk taker and if you are okay to make friends with change, then you should really apply to this course, because it's more than just academic, it's a life experience that comes along with it.
That's brilliant. Okay, excellent. Is it good? Perfect. Okay, great.
So this and so much more is also part of a book that we just launched, or that will be launched early next week, which is called Mobility Society. If you're interested in topics like this, of course, you're very welcome to have a look at it. I will stop my presentation here. I hope you found it interesting, and I'd be happy to answer questions. Might there have been some on the way.
Thank you, Wouter. Bueno, para todos nuestros invitados, empezamos una ronda de preguntas y respuestas que quieran hacerle a Wouter sobre su webinar o lo que les haya inspirado. Así es que los invitamos a alzar la mano y los escuchamos.
Alejandra, de hecho, creo que ya tenemos algunas preguntas en el chat que están en la sección de Q&A. Bueno, creo que Fernanda, que Ale está teniendo problemas de conexión. So,
sí, si quieres, claro.
Okay, so let me help you about it, because Ale is
Okay.
having some problems of connection.
Okay.
We have a question from Maria Fernanda. It says, do you believe that in some years, self-driving cars...
Yo aquí estoy, no sé si me escuchan.
Okay, will replace traditional public transportation, such as the subway, buses, and taxis, or will they coexist and integrate this technology into public transit systems?
Okay, so I think we need to look at two things at the same time. One of these aspects is a technological question. Will it technologically be possible in the future that vehicles can drive all by themselves? The answer is probably yes. Not very soon though, because especially the situations you talk about, they are situations in which there is a high level of complexity. And to deal with all this complexity, of course, the systems need to be very advanced. And currently, we are not there yet. That's also why I mentioned that probably the first areas in which driverless technology will be implemented is in situations like on the highway, or in situations where speed is very slow. So for example, if you just go in pedestrian areas and do not go faster than 10 kilometers an hour. So that's the technological aspect. The other side of the question is, of course, do we want that? Will all buses and so on, and trams and so on, will they be replaced by driverless cars? Probably not, because then we talk about density. You can just fit much more people into a bus, and it is a much better use of space to continue to do so. That does not mean that the bus cannot evolve. I think that driverless technology in public transport, or integrated in public transport, that we already know, can have its advantages. For example, driverless technology would allow you to have your bus stopping at exactly the same spot every time again, over and over again, which means that you can start to build your infrastructure to accommodate for that, and to actually have a more efficient flow of people there. And so there are various levels and ways in which you can answer the question. But I think in the end it comes down to the things that I mentioned. So technologically, it will be possible. Question remains whether we want it or not.
Perfect. Thank you, Wouter. So Alejandra has already joined us again, so she's going to help you with the questions.
Yes, I don't look at it, Claudia. I put in the chat of question and answers, and I don't look any answers.
I sent you a picture of the questions.
Okay, let's do it. Melanie is correct?
Yeah.
Okay, Melanie asks you, Wouter, the mob objects are still a prototype, or are they already located on the streets for people to use them?
Okay, so the objects were a concept that was developed in-house, so that means without a client. After that, we actually received quite a bit of interest, especially from different cities around the world that wanted to start to experiment with them. In the end, we decided not to push this forward. So the project we developed up until engineering feasibility. So that means that we have a basic understanding of what is required, how it works, and creating some interesting imagery and so on, to let people dream about the concept. But in favor of other projects, of which today I didn't show them yet, because some of them are still under secrecy. In favor of other projects, we left it there. Because of course, if you want to push it further, of course, you have to make a physical prototype and so on. So we ended with virtual prototypes, and we have a fully virtual urban experience with objects driving around. But up till today, they do not exist yet in a physical version.
Perfect. Okay, we have another question from Adriana Ugalde. She said, this type of solutions change into the time and also can convert to a tourist attraction?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of and I assume the question is still about these objects. I think one of the benefits is that they are designed as something that sets a game without defining the rules of the game. So it is basically like an abstract playground for children almost. And so the more abstract something is, and the more or the less defined something is, children often find their own use for it and to it. And so it is very natural that the use of these type of vehicles, of course, can change, and probably would change over time, and can convert into a lot of different things. Yes.
Yes, of course. Another question, there are a lot, but we also ask you three more. Maria Fernanda also asks you, how would you implement mobility within a retail store?
Within a retail store, okay. I think
within a retail store.
I think that's a very different question, and it's something that we actually did not tackle today. But so Mobility within a retail store, or so mobility within buildings. Of course, it depends on the scale of things and how it goes. I think there are two aspects to keep an eye on. One is, of course, the motion and the movement, the mobility of people, customers, and the other side is, of course, the mobility of the goods. So the products that you're going to buy. And both are in constant evolution. So what we see is that a large amount of retail stores, they tend to disappear and they tend to be replaced by e-commerce. And so the Amazons of this world, for example, they take over. So there goes your physicality. Honestly, I'm not an expert on these type of things. I think what usually is done is to work a lot with persuading customers into buying certain products, which is something that, of course, we know a lot from publicity. But I'm quite sure that experts in retail store design are up and running with answering your question and what it would look like in the future.
Yes, maybe. Okay. Again, Melanie asks you, how can this type of mobility be implemented on a country like Mexico?
Okay. Therefore, I should admit that I should study Mexico a bit better to understand it. What is important for you to understand and to take away from this session is that, as I said quite at the start, is that mobility design should be contextual. So that means that probably the solutions that I described today cannot be simply copied and pasted into the other side of the world. Some elements might still be valid, but other things might not work, and it can have to do with topology, with the weather, with cultural differences. So you have a lot of different things that you need to take into account. Hence also why mobility design is transdisciplinary, because you need to have all the skills in your team to address all these things. So I think to answer very concretely, I think a profound study of Mexico should be made first before we can move into that.
Perfect. Yes. Okay. Another question from Karina Torrejon is, do you have any social media where we can see your work or more about this topic?
Okay, yes. So as I said before, so most of the things that I presented today can be found on the website of Gran Studio. So that is simply granstudio.com. And there you can also find links towards our social channels. So we are also on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, like many other companies. But of course, if you really want to know more, Karina, then I invite you, after you have a bachelor's degree in something, to enroll into the Master of Transdisciplinary Mobility Design, and you would be very welcome to do so.
Perfect. Okay, and the last one is from Loani, and she asked, what do you think about hostile architecture?
Hostile architecture is a bit of a controversial topic, and also here I have to admit that I'm for sure not an expert on this specific topic. As a team within the studio, probably we would also be able to cover a question like this more precise. But from a personal point of view, of course, it's very double, and it's, I think, on one hand, like with many things in life, I very much understand why such things exist, but on the other hand, it's completely ludicrous to try to imagine why such things exist. I think though that doing good for everyone is of course a very noble goal, but is something that in practice is very hard to achieve. And so specifically you're talking about architecture, so infrastructure, which of course is a reflection somehow of society. And I think you, Luani, probably you are also a designer in some sort of way. So I think as a designer, you should really take up the role as being an agent of change, and through your design, through your proposals, convince society that what you propose actually is better than what already exists. And so this again ties a bit to this very last slide that I showed with this book, which is called Mobility Society, which goes deeper also into those type of topics.
Perfect. Well, we have a lot of questions, but the time is over, as you know, and we have to stop here. And can you remind us where we can find your ebook or your book? We can find it in some link or somewhere.
Okay, so the book will be presented only next week to the public on Dutch Design Week in the Netherlands, and I'm quite sure that if you start to follow the social channels of Grand Studio, that you will be able to find a link somewhere next week with all the information if you want to know more.
Perfect. Okay. Let me talk in Spanish. Para la gente que si no hay un entendimiento, el libro lo va a lanzar la próxima semana en la Feria de Países Bajos, pero bueno, toda la información va a estar en su página de Gran Estudio y en sus redes para los que estén interesados. Okay, Walter, I have to say goodbye to all the students or the people, and I have to talk some things in Spanish. Thank you for staying with us. It's a pleasure to me about your webinar, to listen to you and to know you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot to all of you, and I wish you a nice day.
Okay. Or if you want to say something to close, a little words, if you want.
No, I think as I said before, so this has only been a very short introduction, and I welcome you if you want to know more about certain topics to look at the website of Grand Studio and to consider, of course it's a master program, but if you already have at least a bachelor's degree, to consider to enroll at the Instituto Europeo de Design to follow the master course of Transdisciplinary Mobility Design, where we have 2 years where we can go much deeper into topics like this. Thanks a lot to all of you.
Thank you again. Thank you very much. Muy bien, pues vamos a cerrar y pues gracias a todos por esta interesante sesión, porque todos participamos de alguna manera. Esperamos que resulte provechosa para acercar a los estudiantes mexicanos y al público general que nos acompañó el día de hoy al concepto Made in Italy. En nombre de la Cámara de Comercio Italiana en México, me gustaría expresar mi gratitud por su presencia en esta sesión. También extiendo mi agradecimiento a todas las marcas que forman parte del encuentro creativo, entre ellas Essilor, Luxótica, Secna, Fénix, Aeroméxico, Max Mara, Cartel y United Colors of Benetton, entre otras. Quiero recordar también a todos los estudiantes que las universidades asociadas al encuentro creativo ofrecen becas. Pueden encontrar los criterios de elegibilidad en la página web o en la sección becas. Es esencial asistir al menos al 50% de las sesiones del encuentro creativo, Así que por favor, asegúrate de marcar tu asistencia durante las sesiones en el apartado del chat. Ahí viene el link para que no lo pierdan. En la de hoy ahí está. Y gracias por unirse a nosotros y no olvide que tenemos muchas más sesiones por delante. Apenas estamos en el segundo día del encuentro creativo. Así es de que muchísimas gracias por haber estado con nosotros y dejo la palabra a las personalidades de encuentro creativo. Muchísimas gracias, buen día, gracias.
Muchas gracias, Ale, por apoyarnos. Nos vemos en la siguiente.
Gracias, saludos a todos.